Hooked on Life, the podcast, is a division of PN Entertainment Canada, inspiring innovation through entertainment.
The opinions expressed in Hooked on Life are for conversational purposes only. This podcast may also contain language that some may find offensive. Now, on to the show.
Hey, I'm Cindy Lynn. I'm a free spirit heading into my 50s with abandon. I was an actor, director, teacher who had a midlife break when I turned 37. I left a toxic marriage, moved across the country with 2 kids, no money, and no job. I decided to start life over again on my own terms. Found sobriety, learned to like myself, to show up for my kids, my family, and my friends. Found a home in the corporate world. Fell in love with my junior high school sweetie, Shay. I love to travel, kickbox, teach. I practice saying yes every day and love being a badass.
And I'm Shane. Shaner, or as my wife calls me, Shay Bear. I am British, and I came close to becoming an American, but I'm Canadian. I'm a musician who got lost in the lifestyle and sobered up years ago. I got married to my girlfriend from middle school, but don't worry, we were grown-ups by then. We travel a lot, we own property far, far away, and this podcast was her idea. With all that said, welcome to Hooked on Life.
Hi, hot stuff.
If you could just say that again, just to a little bit more oomph, because then I can...
Hey, hot stuff.
And now you crackled.
Hot stuff. You just like me saying hot stuff over and over and over again.
No, we're just trying to get the EQ on your voice.
You are hot stuff.
There we go.
You are hot stuff.
Thank you, dear.
Do you want me to tell you that you're hot stuff again?
No.
You sure?
Yes. I think we started. Yeah, we started.
Okay.
How are you?
I'm good.
That's good.
How are you?
I'm good.
Yeah?
Yeah. Yeah. What's the for? Okay.
Should I go?
Well, yeah, sure. I mean, I can go or you can go. You always go.
Yeah, I want to go.
Well, then please. Don't go. Stay, but start.
Wow. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're listening from. We are Cindy and Shay, and we are here with Hooked on Life, the podcast, and we are absolutely sensationally excited that you have decided to join us.
That is very true.
I need to tell you, I was watching my intake of breath, and I almost panicked because I didn't have any breath in my lungs at the end of that sentence.
Oh, well, don't do that.
I'm afraid to breathe.
No, don't do that. I got these new, they're Spanx rip-off shirts.
I cannot believe you're sharing that.
Well, come on. We're all getting a little bit older, a little bit longer in the tooth, a little bit wider in the waist. I got 2, actually. I got these 2 new shirts. They're shirts, they're like Spanx rip-offs. Anyway, I got them from a company online called Amazon, and at first they're to suck you in, right?
I know what Spanx are, dear.
Yeah, well, I really need them. I know that there's been some real tragedy with the pandemic. For me, the tragedy has been my waistline.
You're really going to blame your waistline on the pandemic?
No, I'm not blaming the pandemic on my waistline. No. But I must admit I've eaten a little bit too poorly during the pandemic. So let's just get to the chase here. I did buy 2 Spanx rip-offs online, and they work. Like, they don't... I really thought I would look like Chris Hemsworth with these things on, but I don't. I still look like me. It's just taken some of the... What did you call it? They took some of the rounds off of me. Is that what you said?
Flattens you out a bit.
Christ.
Streamlines the fat.
Well, it's not streamlined at all, really, frankly. And you know what? Every time I get in and out of the car, because I'm working a lot in and out of the car now, I've changed careers. Every time I get in and out of the car, these Spanx ripoffs ride up.
Isn't that a bitch?
Well, so then what's the fucking point, right?
Welcome to my life.
Anyway, if anyone has any complaints with these rip-off Spanx rip-off shirts, please comment on wherever you can. Comment on wherever you comment down below or above or around. I don't know. Yeah, whatever. Anyway, I thought I would feel better about myself than I do with these shirts on. And you know what? I get out of the shower. I wash this wig I have on my head, and it's very humid in the shower. It's very humid, and trying to put on one of these fuckers when I'm still sheening of moisture is fucking torture. It's torture. It really is. It's fucking torture. And I'm like, this is no pain, no gain, right? So, what I could do is just do 100 sit-ups every other day for a month, and then this fucking tire around me would be going away, and I wouldn't need a shirt. But to imagine myself doing 100 sit-ups, did I say push-ups or 100 sit-ups? I said sit-ups, right?
Yes, you did.
To imagine, well, either doing 100 push-ups or sit-ups, it doesn't matter. To imagine myself to do that, even if it's for a good cause, like trimming up my waistline, is not in the fucking cards. So I'm going to just have to deal with it. I thought about getting a tensor bandage to tie whatever I can do to just...
I had no idea, dear. I had no idea.
You have no idea what I'm going through right now.
Well, I do, because that's been my whole life, but I had no idea you were going through it.
Anyway, yeah, so I'm going to continue wearing these shirts until I give up, but if I put on 5 more pounds, I'm going to give up.
You can come to kickboxing with me.
I could. Yeah, I could. I can't see myself getting up at 5:30 in the morning. So, anyway,
well, let's change topics, shall we?
Okay.
Let's talk about another favorite topic of ours, other than money, music.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So we've talked about a lot of things on this podcast, but we haven't spent a lot of time talking about music in the Gen X era.
Like we're talking about...
70s.
Yeah, so disco, just coming out of disco. Mm-hmm. There was, I guess, to some of us, hard rock, heavy rock was just sprouting. Like Clapton and Cream was kind of like, some would argue they're the first metal band, right? I don't know about that. But we have Zeppelin, then we get into Dio, we get into Black Sabbath, we've got into like the 70s, right? Uriah Heep, some really heavy, cool shit. And then it lightens up along the way into, the disco, right? Mm-hmm. YMCA, like we get into Village People, Gloria Gaynor, right? Mm-hmm. And then it turns into 80s, which is, well, pop, right? The pop versions, Michael Jackson, right?
Or does it? I think that's what makes the music of the Gen X era so unforgettable, is that to try to bottle it is very difficult, because sure, we had Debbie Gibson, but we also had In Excess. We also had Motley Crue. We also had Kiss that was making a resurgence in the 80s.
Yeah, Ramones, Sex Pistols.
We also had electronic music like Depeche Mode. So it's really difficult to try to think of what was music of Gen X. I mean, then you've got Elton John and Billy Joel.
Yeah.
It exploded on so many levels.
Yeah.
And how many radio stations are still devoted to playing music of that era?
And then we had in our own country, we had like Chilliwack. We had Foreigner.
Bryan Adams.
Yeah.
Celine Dion.
Glass Tiger.
Luba.
Yeah. So.
Huge.
Yeah. A lot of good stuff that had come out. And that comes in waves, right? And then we go back to the pop with Debbie Gibson and Tiffany. And then we go back and forth and back and forth. But music has always been a really exciting place. I would even say before the Beatles, the model of music changed when the Beatles came. Elvis too. Elvis was huge right before Beatles came around. I heard a comment. I don't know if it was in the movie that we saw with the Austin Butler movie that was fucking awesome, right? Yeah. But wasn't it in the film that he said he was worried about the Beatles coming because it was going to take away some of his thunder, which it did, of course, right? It did. But that's not a problem because there was different styled music, right? In my opinion. Mm-hmm. I remember Michael Jackson and David Bowie getting along just fine. They did the We Are the World and they were together on that. So I'm sure there was some animosity, but music shouldn't be a competition. Sorry, I got to get off track there.
That's okay. What was your biggest musical hero influence from that era?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm a huge Clapton fan. I'm a huge Cream fan. I love Jimmy Page too. I love Zeppelin. I was such a Clapton fan, and I still am, that I learned who Jimi Hendrix was through Clapton. A lot of people would learn the opposite. They would learn Hendrix, and then, oh yeah, there was this guy from England called Clapton. But I learned the other way around. I'd heard of Hendrix, of course. I didn't get into Hendrix until after I was waist deep with Clapton stuff, right? So, but I was also a big fan of Glass Tiger. I saw In Excess live back in 1989. I saw The Cult live with the Soup Dragons. I think the Soup Dragons opened for them, and that was really fucking awesome. That was back in the day, back in the 80s, 89, I think. God, that was so fucking long ago now. That was the first time I saw a pop can crushed, and people had been smoking out of it.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what that was. I was very young, right? So I don't know how.
Oh, young, like 16?
Yeah, I think I just turned 16, yeah.
Wow.
Just turned 16 at the Saddle Dome. We were standing on top of they had benches on the floor.
Yeah.
And we were standing on the back rests, standing on those to watch the concert.
Amazing.
Yeah, it was pretty fucking awesome, yeah. Yeah, Harrison Coe, a famous, I'd say he's a pretty famous actor. He took me. He took me at the concert, yeah. I don't know, I think he was 18, I was 16, yeah.
Amazing.
What about you?
Well,
you've seen some pretty heavy concerts.
I've seen quite a few concerts in my life. I would say if I was to think of music from Gen X that stirs my soul the most, it would be in a couple different categories. First and foremost, Queen, Freddie Mercury.
You didn't see Queen live.
No, I didn't see Queen live. I'm talking about musical influences.
Okay.
Freddie Mercury, to me, is the living end. I think he was just magnetic. So who did I see live? Wow. Me and my friend Denise, we went to a lot of concerts. Everything from like Kim Mitchell. Went and saw Kim Mitchell, Midnight Oil.
Oh, yeah. There you go.
Richard Marx.
Okay.
Alana Miles. You know, then there's the Motley Crues, Kiss, Fleetwood Mac. Yeah.
My friend Rob Bartolucci, you can give a wave. I'm sure he's out there somewhere. He did all the guitar work for Alana Miles' album.
I have a funny Alana Miles story. Do you want to hear it? So I was a huge Alana Miles fan. I love Joan Jett, Heart Sisters, Pat Benatar, Stevie Nicks, Joan Jett, Blondie. So when Alana Miles came out and she was Canadian, I was really excited about that. So I very promptly dyed my hair black and started to wear very light foundation on my face and put red lipstick on and wear all black in an attempt to look like Alana Miles. And me and Denise got tickets, like front row for the concert. And I remember in the concert, her at one point saying like, oh, are you trying to look like me? And I thought that was such a compliment. And I was like, yeah, woo. And she sort of laughed at me and made some sort of derogative comment about it. And I realized she's totally dissing me.
Oh, brutal.
I was so geeky, I didn't even realize it.
That's brutal.
Yeah.
Rod Stewart. I don't know Rod Stewart. First of all, I don't. Yeah,
Let's have him on the show.
Yeah, that'd be fucking great.
That'd be
we'll
awesome.
have him in the fucking studio. That'd be great. He has the story for when he was. I don't think he was with the Faces. I think he was after he was with the Faces in the 70s though, and he went back to his hotel room. It was after a show or after a press conference, and he had to take a big fucking shit. Right? We all do, right? We all do. And so he's in the hotel bathroom unloading his colon. Yeah. And there were two fans.
I'm sorry, can I stop you? That is the first time I have ever heard someone describe taking a shit as unloading their colon. Wow. Good description there, Micheal.
Well, I'm just trying to think of a way of saying it without... Anyway, so he's
taking a shit.
Yes.
Taking a dump. Unloading the groceries.
And there are two female fans behind the shower curtain. They got into his hotel room somehow, and while he was giving birth to the big boss, these two women started freaking out, and fucking there'd be some serious premature pinch going on for me. I'd be like freaking right out, like the fuck. Anyway, so so you saw all these great bands, okay? Yeah. Was it anything that stood out to you? Like if you said to the daughter...
Which I will say, my daughter...
She would be like, Mommy, who's your favorite band of all time in the 80s?
My daughter has very much gotten into 80s and 90s retro music. Very into Queen and Metallica and Slipknot and Rob Zombie and
Slipknot was
Nirvana.
more in the 90s, but anyway, okay.
Rage Against the Machine. And what I have said to her about that time period, which was so great, is the energy of the music was incredible. And the freshness of the music was incredible. It wasn't overproduced, it wasn't overmanaged. It was like this raw, exciting time that we all got to be a part of. And the live concert experience was such a part of that for me. And I feel sad for her generation because, like she said to me, did you go to concerts a lot? I said, well, yeah, me and Denise Jackson went whenever we could. But the tickets were maybe $35. And the girl said, well, that can't happen anymore. The concert tickets are so expensive. And it's true. It's almost become inaccessible for the everyday fan, which is a shame. But that's what it was for me. It was the live experience. It was the music videos.
You saw Metallica live?
No, I've never seen Metallica live.
You saw AC/DC live?
I've seen AC/DC a couple times live.
Okay.
I've seen a lot of concerts. I loved going to music concerts. Now, speaking of live music, I can safely say that I have actually seen our next guest on stage, and I can completely confirm and verify that he was absolutely electric and magnetic. He was playing bass for a show called the Jason Bonham Experience, which was a tribute show that I saw in, I believe it was 2010. And it was a tribute to the late John Bonham. And it was a great show, excellent show. And I had the opportunity to meet our next guest and get to know him a little bit. And he's a really great guy. And I'm really excited to welcome him onto the show and hear his views on all things Gen X music.
Yeah, he is a Gen Xer for sure.
Totally, Gen Xer.
I think he's the same age as us, too.
Yeah, and he kind of looks like you a little bit.
Well, a little bit. Just a little bit. I think he's taller than me.
Yeah, and maybe a little skinnier. I don't think he needs to wear the Spanx shirts.
Probably not. Probably not.
I'm sorry.
Anyway, our next guest is famous in so many different ways. Depending on what music genre you have listened to in your life, you will know exactly who we're talking about. He is a consummate bass player. We would see him with George Lynch, with the Lynch Mob. You'll remember him with Whitesnake as the bass player of Whitesnake. He's been on all the albums from 2011 onward. Not only does he play bass, he's a singer. He's a harmonica player. You'd find him on all the Whitesnake albums from Forevermore, Made in Japan, Made in Britain, the Purple album, the Purple Tour, and Flesh and Blood in 2019. He took a break from Whitesnake, and now we will see him live with Canada's own The Guess Who on tour. This is a heavyweight. Simon couldn't sleep last night. He couldn't sleep the night before with Jeff Douglas either. I'm just thrilled that he's going to be on our show, dear. We're going to take a short break. We'll get prepared. Are you excited?
Yeah, he's a great conversationalist.
This will be interesting to see where we go. Mr. Michael Devin will be with us on our little podcast that could. We're very thrilled to be having him on our show.
Yes.
We'll be right back after this. You're listening to
Hooked on Life.
Hey listener, yes you, I'm talking to you. Are you sitting there wondering how you can be a part of Hooked on Life? We are looking for corporations and people, yes, people just like you, who want to help sponsor our little podcast. There's so much we can do together. If you are hooked to help, contact us right now at hookedonlifethepodcast@gmail.com and in the subject line say, I want to help. And don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Podbean. And we want to thank you for continuing to support Hooked on Life.
And welcome back, everybody. We are absolutely stoked and psyched and all of those things to welcome our next guest.
Stoked and psyched.
Yeah.
That's great.
It's none other than the amazing craftsman of bass, Michael Devin.
Hello, sir.
Well, hello out there. And podcasting. It's great sitting here talking to you about these the topic of Gen X and all that kind of entails, because it's an interesting topic. Maybe to us because we're all Gen Xers, probably why. Which would also explain our Gen Xness right there. Say no more.
Can I call you Michael or Mr. Devin, or what would be suffice?
Yeah, you can call me Michael, Mike, Devin, Dev, Devs, Hitman. That was my nickname when I was a kid.
Yeah, we haven't formally met before, you and I, so I wasn't sure where we would go, and it's really great to meet you.
It's nice to meet you as well. Absolutely.
Hey, Michael, we know that you have parted ways with Whitesnake after 10 years with the band. Just wondering what you're working on these days.
I've been playing with a band, the Guess Who, for over a year. And that was fun. I love those guys and I love those tunes. I definitely spun a lot of Guess Who when I was a kid, the Greatest Hits album. So it's cool and fun to play those bass lines. And after that, I just recently had to put the tour cycle down with the Guess Who and enter a new fold. And some of that I can discuss, some of that I can't, and it's all good. But maybe I'll swing back around at some other point on this podcast when I talk about other aspects of it. But it's all good stuff. But right now I'm doing some stuff with my good buds Brian Tishy on drums and Doug Aldrich on guitar. And years ago, we had a little 3-piece that we called Steamroller, and that was born out of our time spent together in the band Whitesnake. We were the rhythm section there, and alongside Reb Beach and Micheal Lupe eventually, and Joel Hoekstra eventually, and Brian Rudy at one point. Anyway, but that's kind of how that was born. Steamroller was just because we were on times when we didn't tour with David. David had a cycle going at one time where he'd tour for a year and then he'd take a year off from touring and either like write or record or both, So in that time off, we would dip out as Steamroller and just do our take on cover songs. Really, it's what it was. It's just we're just trying to have some fun and play music. Really, we're not trying to take it too seriously. I'm sure eventually we'll write something together, but I think we like the lightheartedness of it and the fact that, we just do things like we mash up songs a lot, which is kind of a dorky muso kind of thing to do.
And Steamroller is another project that you're working on. What exactly are you doing with them?
Steamroller, I'm rehearsing with those guys. We got some shows coming up. One, the Ride for Ronnie, James Dio, cancer benefit concert. That's top of May.
Michael, we actually do have some listeners in California, so if you want to give us the details, I think that'd be great to share.
It's the Stand Up and Shout Cancer Fund, and that's May 7th. And that's from noon to 5 at the Los Encinos Historic Park in Encino, California. If you happen to be in LA and in California, there's a plug for you.
So, Michael, you're currently breathing the air in Los Angeles. Is that correct? Yes, and no. I'm also, I'm out here right now to play music, but I have been on the other side of the country for a little bit now with my lovely wife, and we're just trying to. I don't know. Look, man, I live like right in the heart of. It's like I live in Hollywood, so I'm like right in it. I walk the Walk of Fame home every night, even though I don't want to, because I'm trying to avoid all the pentagrams that are all on the street. Outside of that, I and the billboards. It's funny because being away from here when I came back, I was like, my God, it's like this place is insane, But I'd been living here for 25 years almost, so there's definitely a love-hate relationship there. It's abusive. But, I think it's the last of my dysfunctional relationships that I've got to wrap up at this point in time in life. So I uprooted everything, gear, life, stuff. We did, I should say, because this was a joint effort and affair. My partner is, she's got her own goals and dreams and pursuits. So luckily, I'm with someone that we're moving in the same directions. It seems like we're kind of just sort of walking with each other, which is cool. There's no push or pull. So
we're getting a lot done and we're making a lot of moves, which is welcoming to me. But as you make more moves, so it seems in the magic of life, you kind of kick up more opportunities. So that's kind of what's happening. There's a lot going on. I feel like I'm all over the map, and I kind of am all over the map, but that's okay. It's all good. I've got a route down in a few different spots now. We're also down in Florida as well. I know, sounds crazy, but it's true. We've got a few things happening. So that's pretty much what I'm doing right now in life right now. Playing a lot of music, living a lot of life, growing my life in a personal, familial tip, kind of, I guess they call that settling down, although I think that is kind of an absurd statement. There's nothing settling except the fact that you found like somebody to be cozy with. You both can kind of look out at life and be like, oh, fuck. Like, oops, I just didn't mean to swear.
You can say whatever the fuck you want. You're our guest and we're thrilled that you're here, but we know exactly what you're talking about. You know what I mean?
You know what I'm saying? It's nice when you kind of, when it aligns and you sort of see life through somewhat of the same lens. You don't feel so crazy or extreme or out there or artistic.
Well, I don't know if we're really settled or not, but we have known each other since 1986.
That's right.
So we know what you're talking about.
Wow.
Yeah, I was 12 and Shay was 13.
It was all legal. We're all legal.
Really? Okay, wait. So have you guys maintained this consistently the whole time?
No, we were sort of in junior high school. We passed notes. We signed yearbooks. We secretly met outside the band room doors to have little kisses.
That's right.
And then we lost touch after school for 20 years, and Facebook reunited us together.
And now we're lovers.
And now we are lovers. Good times.
Oh, yeah. Good times.
That is good times. Those are good times. Wow. How amazing, though, that you have that and you share that. That's really, really cool.
Now, speaking of growing up,
yes,
let's switch gears here and let's talk about life as a Gen Xer. What was it that your life looked like growing up as a young person and all the things that we were exposed to? How did that influence you? How did that really carve out the kinds of choices that you decided to make as you got older?
Wow. As they say these days, the kids, it's a lot to unpack there. But it's kind of baffling when I think back on that time period, like literally. It's sort of baffling because there was a lot going on out there in the world I graduated in 1992. So, grunge was in full swing, and a war was in full swing, and these kinds of things, right? The Bush regime and this kind of madness. So modeling, high fashion was big, very influential. I remember that being a very big thing at the time. Hip hop was very big. R&B was still very big. Contemporary artists like Belle Biv DeVoe and the singers there, they what they called there, they looked like the Supremes in one of their videos.
Oh, Beyonce?
No, it goes back to, I forget their names. Somebody out there screaming at their radio right now or whatever, their listening device going, "It's blah, you idiot." They sang a song, was it like Never Gonna Get It or something like that?
Oh, On Vogue.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I never would have conjured that one. En Vogue. You got it. Bam. Thank you. So that kind of stuff was also permeating the airwaves and the television, was pretty much nonstop at that time. MTV was pretty big and they were just spinning this stuff 24 hours, which was another kind of thing that happened to us growing up at that time. I think was the news cycle had gone from a more traditional, let's say 1950s approach, 60s, signing off, the nightly news at, 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock. But it went from that to this 24-hour news cycle brought to you by, 3-letter news agencies. And then that turned into, which is crazy in hindsight, but it's almost laughable, but we still fall for it, which is it's like, well, I don't listen to CNN. I don't watch CNN. I only watch Fox. Oh God, you're crazy for watching Fox. Do I get a third choice here? But back then we didn't know what it was going to mushroom into. So these things were influencing us, but I think we were all still largely optimistic, and we still look toward a future with technology that wasn't going to enslave us, and so to speak, that we were going to use it to our advantage and to the benefit of like the planet. Let's just say, call it right out, the oceans and the air and the land and the soil. Like somehow we were going to use this technology to better our environs.
Michael, we all have a hometown somewhere. Cindy and I are from the Stampede headquarters of Calgary, Alberta, originally. Where are you from? Are you from the Eastern Seaboard? You're not from California originally.
I come from Massachusetts. I come from out of the Worcester area, pretty much, and a town called Leominster. And, when I was growing up, it was still, if I go back into the memory bank of the 1970s, let's say back then, I was very little, but I can still recall the vast woodlands that I kind of grew up around. There was a lot of forests and swampland and all this kind of stuff. And then the big bulldozers came in some point in the late 80s and just chomped all that up and paved it over and built homes and da-da-da. But I remember, apple orchards, because the city itself of Leominster is the birthplace of John Chapman, also known as Johnny Appleseed. So it's got a pretty schizophrenic personality, my hometown, because it's also the pioneer plastic city. That means all the plastic goods, that means basically all the chemical waste and burnage and debris and destruction started in Leominster, Massachusetts, and to some degree, in the U.S. So they're pioneer plastics, and they are the birthplace of Johnny Appleseed. So we had a lot of apple orchards growing up.
Leominster has a similarity to Chicago, where there's a north side and there's a south side, right? I mean, it's a smaller city than Chicago, of course. Are you from the north side or are you from the south side?
I grew up on the south side of the town, so I was around all of the more natural habitats for living creatures, for wildlife. But like I said, by the 90s, it was all neighborhoods. They just lifted whatever caps they had on that land for preservation, or whoever, somebody sold it. I don't know what happened. All I know is that kind of happened. And, life changed. Like that was all moving into where we are now, really. It was this, even in my surroundings, I went from something that felt more outdoorsy to something that felt more suburban, for sure, residential. I now looked out the back windows of our house and I didn't see a dense forest anymore. I saw somebody in their kitchen window looking back at me, so it was bizarre.
It was kind of a bizarre time, wasn't it?
There were a lot of bizarre things happening at that time growing up, because I can go back to the 70s and then into the 80s. I can still see that time when we were less digitized and technocratized than we are now. So I have a point of view that, we do, I guess, as a collective in that time period that others may not.
And so where did music fit in to your childhood?
Music was still a big influence on the youth culture. And I grew up in a region that was very much into hard rock. And there was a culture surrounding it. And I happened to be kind of born in a neighborhood that happened to have a lot of, I guess you'd call them punks, greasers, just ne'er-do-wells, and I remember these kids, they were older, much, a lot older, but I remember the way they kind of dressed. It was like, cut off jean jacket sleeves and some old Judas Priest t-shirt and like this fuck you attitude with his boombox on his shoulder and, some handkerchief around his bicep or something. It was still these, it was the remnants of the early 80s, late 70s thing. Those kids were, maybe they were 10 years older or 8 years older, but it was enough of a span where I was like, wow, who is that? And what is that he's listening to? What is this stuff? And there was something about the culture that took me in with music more, as much as the music itself,
I had a friend in middle school, and his older brother had posters in his bedroom on his wall in the basement of where they lived. And he had a Kiss poster, and it had Gene Simmons with blood all over his mouth with the makeup on at that time. And I was freaked the fuck out, right? I was fucking freaked out because I wasn't influenced by that kind of music at that time. When I was young, I was being privately taught guitar at that time. This is so many years ago now. How did you get into playing, and how did that affect you in your life?
I didn't come into music as as a student. I was not, traditionally trained or anything like that. It was all kind of self-taught, but it was all really born out of the culture of what it meant to be a rocker, or whatever you want to call them, at that time, a hesher, or stoner wasn't quite a word yet. And not everybody was a stoner, but everybody did like rock and roll. And most people did, because we were kids, you drink beer or whatever, right? Like smoke cigarettes. This was maybe you get a tattoo, because this was pre, everyone walking around with sleeves and full body tattoos. So I remember all of that. That's really what influenced me the most, with those young formative years, where these kids in my neighborhood, some of whom are no longer with us, because, it was a lot of craziness, a lot of wild people come from my hometown. And I think people will attest to that.
Why was everybody so wild?
Because we were bored, I think, largely bored. There was not a lot to do in that town in the 80s and into the 90s and stuff. You kind of made your own fun, light bonfires out in the woods, bring your boom boxes, bring your cassettes, CDs, whatever, eventually, but at that time, bring cases of beer, go swim in a reservoir, in the summer months, that kind of stuff. We did a lot of walking and listening to music. That's kind of what I did as a kid.
Michael, we both have siblings growing up, and they're still around, thank God. Do you have siblings? Like, how is it growing up in the house?
So I have older sisters, and so they hang out with older boys, and that's where it all sort of began for me. I was curious as to what these moppy-haired, long-haired boys were like listening to. It intrigued me, and I kind of never. It's sort of been the through line. I would say is that curiosity and love for that particular genre of music. I really do just love it. I do. I don't know why, but I just do. It doesn't really matter why. What matters more is that it's the one thing in my life that I always am optimistic about. It's the thing that brings me joy, and it's the thing that brings me experiences and that kind of stuff. So, and I meet people all the time, and it's just a journey with an instrument, and music and stuff. That sounds corny perhaps, but that's how I see it. That's how it started for me anyway. I wanted to do what those dudes were doing. I saw AC/DC and I just went like, oh man, like what was that? I want one of those. What's he holding? What is that? It was an SG, which is a killer looking guitar. But it was just great, exciting stuff. And that's kind of was my gateway drug into rock music was, AC/DC.
I too am a huge AC/DC fan, and my brother and I have spent numerous afternoons in a car driving, listening to AC/DC and going to see them in concert several times. Were there any other influences you had growing up as a young boy that were outside of the hard rock genre?
I have very young memories of other music, though. Growing up in my grandmother's house, there were 45s, a lot of 45s and LPs from my auntie. She graduated in 1972. So her record collection was like killer stuff.
Yeah, for me growing up, we had a lot of vinyls that my folks had back in the day. A lot of Elton John, a lot of Jefferson Starship, if you could believe that. And we had a few Beatles albums. Were you influenced by the Beatles? I'm sure you listened to a lot of Beatles.
I heard a lot of Beatles as a kid, a lot of Beatles, and I loved that. And I heard, just singles, Petula Clark and Temptations and Supremes and Four Tops, Frank Zappa, Steve Miller Band, and just, little kid. I remember hearing those things. And obviously radio played a big part in that, the things that were big in the 70s, the Eagles and, Wings and these kinds of bands that, Ambrosia, the things that like my mom would have on the ride to the store, right? Kind of stuff, that all got absorbed in there too. Carole King, this kind of stuff. I'd hear it and be like, wow, okay, that's good. I just feel like I always had an ear for it. I felt like I could connect to the stuff that was really good musically. Like it hit a nerve, Not every band can do that. They might be fashionable or they might be like really proficient at their instruments, but it doesn't really mean they hit you like where it matters.
Michael, was the bass the first instrument you grabbed? Was it the second instrument? Well, a lot of people go from the guitar to piano or piano to guitar and then bass. How did the bass come in?
I tinker on other instruments, but bass was sort of my love for whatever reason. I can't explain it. I don't know why. I feel like, honestly, someone just showed up one day and said, here, you should play bass. Okay, I'm going to sell you one. Come to my house this weekend. Okay. And I went there and handed him the money, and he handed me the bass. I took it home. I opened the case and I said, what the hell is this? This doesn't look like an SG. This is kind of goofy looking. It's got the big tuning knobs and I didn't 4 strings. I was like, what is this thing, man? And so I called him the next day, and he said, yeah, hey, listen, I was really drunk and stoned last night, because I went to his house when he was having a party to get the bass. And he's like, you got to bring back everything I gave you so I can go through it, because he gave me all this shit, man. He gave me like a flanger pedal, a tuner, a delay pedal, all this stuff. So I brought it all back down there. He then broke me off a couple of pieces out of kindness, and showed me a couple of riffs. So he made the association suddenly. It was like, oh, that's what that is. Oh, wow. Because he played Tom Sawyer by Rush. He was playing Sweet Emotion by Aerosmith, and he played me, what else did he? Iron Man. He was just trying to show me things that I might be able to pick up. This young man, my buddy, Matty P, he put the bass in my hands, and for whatever reasons, just some kind of, somebody's got to do it, right? So that's where I went. I started to explore. I took the bass home, and I was like, oh, wow, I can play. Let me listen to Iron Man. How does this go? Because he kind of wrote it all down for me, and it sort of set me on my path. My sisters told me I sucked. That's all I would hear all the time. It's like, why don't you shut up, man? God, they just bust the door open. Oh, God, you suck. Because I grew up in a really rough, it was all rough all around. Everyone was rough. Everyone yells their feelings. Nobody, LA softened me. Believe me, I had to. I was going to just turn into a callous prick, But anyway, but they're all everyone's lovable. I'm just saying, I was probably, doomed had I stayed there. Music, I needed to be elsewhere.
So, Michael, knowing all the big bands that you've played with in your career, Lynch Mob, and you were just talking about the Guess Who, and of course Whitesnake, where did you begin? What was the first band experience for you?
My very first band, my buddy drove me to a music store. This is back in the pre-internet, where you had to go and look at, advertisements posted up on corkboard at the local music store, So he drove me there because I wanted to join his band, and he already had a bass player. His brother played bass. So he's like, I can't do that, but I can take you to the store, because I didn't have a license yet. I was 14. So yeah, we just kind of went up to the board, picked some random thing. It had some influences that I think my buddy liked more than I did, but I just kind of nodded like, yeah, it sounds cool, And I went down there, long story short, and these guys were, mid-20s and even like early 30s.
The early years for me, I was always the youngest guy in the band too, so I can relate. I can certainly relate to that.
Yes. They looked at me like, some spotty-faced, shy. I was pretty quiet, stoned a lot at that age, but playing a lot of music. So I just kind of, played along the best I could with them. They asked me back, and on we went. It's kind of the same cliche story, but it's the truth. I had to get snuck into places to play with them. We had to bribe the door dude. We had to talk to the manager, and some places, we didn't play, or I should say I didn't play. They played without a bass player. So that was kind of the beginnings of it for me with music. It just kept growing from there as the arc is still bending today, right? I'm still that same, young kind of burning, soul, so to speak, a bleeding heart, as they say. But it's true. I have passion for music. I really, really do. I think that I still think music and sound can save the world and save the planet. I do.
And with Whitesnake being a huge Gen X band themselves, what was your first exposure to Whitesnake?
At my teen center dancing to Is This Love, and, all that kind of stuff. My first, high school sweetheart kind of thing, and yeah, but I will say, that wasn't a band I actually, listened to. It just wasn't, but, it was sort of ubiquitous at that point. It was everywhere. Those videos were huge. Still of the Night, Is This Love, Here I Go Again. They were on the hour every hour. So it was impossible to avoid. And Coverdale had a badass voice. He did. He's a great, great singer. And the production, I thought, was great on those tracks. They're really cool and slick.
Listen, 80s rock bands were hair and spandex and neon, right? Like, seriously, right?
Oh, yeah, they look like girls.
But, the competition at the time was, who looks and sounds like Poison or, Slaughter or Warrant or Winger or, I love Winger actually because I love Red Beach, Kip Winger. They're all great guys, Rod. But at the time, I'm talking when I was just a teen, I just lashed out against all of it. I liked the more organically grown bands, and they were kind of passe. Like Led Zeppelin was very passe at that point. Everyone was robbing them. They were still like, it was like, yeah, Led Zeppelin, and AC/DC were not, they were making, records that weren't really knocking it out of the park, like Fly on the Wall. And the time those bands were going through lulls while these new bands, Cinderella, Bon Jovi, and Motley Crue, the list goes on and on, right? Those bands were enjoying mega success. They were video kings. That's a whole different racket, so I was kind of stuck in this weird time warp where I wanted to just listen to everything. I didn't want to see you in a weird way. And I don't know why that was. Maybe I was just so intrigued by the posters on my wall or the pictures that I hung. Because whatever was hanging on my wall was up there for a really specific reason. So if it was a picture of Ozzy Osbourne from 1972, looking like a badass rock god.
Oh, yeah, like for sure. Like Ozzy, for sure. No doubt about it.
Yes. Which he was at that time. Sabbath. I mean, they were just great. So anyway, that's what I wanted to see when I was listening to Volume 4 on the stereo, right?
I mean, pre-internet was really different for music in that it was almost like an event of getting the album and then the listening of the album.
In our time, pre-internet and whatnot, it was a time when you absorbed things with, I think, greater care, because they were also more interactive in a way, like vinyl was. You could read the lyrics and read who produced it and mixed it and engineered it and where, and you could see photos you wouldn't see elsewhere and these kinds of things.
Yeah, Michael, those albums back in the day, they came in a packaging with a jacket and it had a lot of artwork and pullouts and all these really cool shit that you would get with the album, right?
I remember the Led Zeppelin 3 album. I didn't know what a Led Zeppelin 3 was, but I remember spinning the wheel and being like, what the heck is this? Years later, because I didn't like Led Zeppelin at first. I didn't get it until I smoked weed. And then I was like, now I get it. I'm only being honest there.
Are you a self-taught musician or did you take professional lessons along the way?
I had learned to self-read at the time because, you couldn't walk into a store and pick up a bass tab book. That didn't exist. So, and it was rare if you found a book that even had music notation for bass to begin with. And if it was accurate, right? A lot of times they just gave you the piano version of bass. But when you're listening to John Paul Jones from Led Zeppelin, doing his thing, you're like, wait a minute. And then you look at the sheet music, you're like, no.
Yeah, Michael, those guitar player magazines with those tablatures, they're all wrong. They're not right. They're all, I don't know who draws them up, but they're totally wrong. Like, how do you learn a song through that, right?
Yes. And I just kind of got it to the point where I could find any sheet music of any bass, at that point that I liked. And I was just gobbling it up because you kind of it's like unlocking a secret. Suddenly you're like, oh, wow. So that's the bass line to this tune,
And were you comfortable singing right off the bat, or?
I had to at least make attempts at singing my notes with, 3 other guys singing. That was also that's something that's helped me immensely. Being in the Guess Who, everyone in that band sings. So I had to contribute there. And those experiences ring back to that time still. But that's kind of where I was. And then one day the clouds kind of parted for me. Because I had tried out for a couple of bands. It was funny. The band had broken up, but the drummer, I really wanted to keep playing with the drummer. And he was kind of like, beat it, kid, a little bit, But I was like I was relentless, So he's like, all right, I'll introduce you to the guys because he just joined this new hair metal band. They were like these super, rad looking dudes with their teased out hair, they're Jacksons or whatever they're playing, the Charvels, and
oh my God, you're talking about serious guitars, right? Like BC Rich and the Charvels, of course, like all the pointy ones, right? Those guys always fucking played those cool ass guitars, right?
Yes. And so it's like, I didn't even play a note. I didn't play a single note. We went to their jam spot. They looked at me and right away I could see it. They're like, nope, not this fucking hesher. Look at this dude. Go back to 1972. But I left there going like, damn, like, like struck out again. But that's what was going on. It just was not meant. I was not meant to explore that for whatever reason. And it's okay. But what happened was I was at the drummer's apartment one day. We were hanging out and watching MTV. And I saw Man in a Box video. That changed me right there. I immediately heard that and thought, my God, who and what is that? That sounds like Black Sabbath. That sounds like kind of, I mean, I wouldn't say Zeppelin-y, but it coming from this place of hard rock, acid rock, riff-based. And the singer, I couldn't believe his style. I thought, wow, listen to how low he's singing. Listen to the, dare I say, the masculinity of his voice. Like, because when I was hearing through the 80s at that time there were a lot of people trying to sing as high as they possibly could for as long as they possibly could. And that became exhausting. All of a sudden this voice came out of the TV and I just thought, wow, who is this? And the drummer had already heard of them. And he's like, oh man, that's Alice in Chains. I'm like, Alice in Chains. Wow. So I left his house at some point, but I couldn't wait to get to the mall because we're going back now. So I drove myself to the mall and looked for the Alice in Chains album. Yes, I purchased it on cassette because my Chevy had a cassette deck in it.
Yes, the mall.
Oh yeah, Michael, for sure. Like all those bands back in the day, Soundgarden, you got the Chili Peppers, Smashing Pumpkins is in there, Pearl Jam, Green Day was just starting to come alive. There was some really exciting shit back in the day, right?
For me, it was just a further expression of what was before it, which was riff-based rock. And that I throw people like Kansas in that, you know what I mean? Carry On Wayward Son is a badass riff. Like that still bleeds into Soundgarden somehow, somewhere, like we were all informed by this music, whether we admit it or not. It doesn't matter. It's in the water. It's in the DNA. If you have any interest in playing music at all, you absorbed all of it. And you kind of weed out what's good and what's not good.
So now we're getting into, of course, grunge.
Yes. Suddenly now they're trying to grow facial hair, and they're wearing the same shit. All these other types. My kind of kid, I guess, growing up, we were wearing the same shit, which is flannels because it's cold in New England, and rock t-shirts because that's what you did. Jean jackets, we layered up. That was sort of the look of that time, late 80s, early 90s, for like rockers. It was like, you don't really have like a really nice big, winter jacket, you've got like 3 hoodies on and your jean jacket and then your leather jacket. And cause you feel, it's like you're representing at all times, this was the look.
Yeah. Fashion and music were all influential, right? That was all influential to us back in that time, right?
At that time, I was feeling very inspired by the music that was popular. There were a lot of bands that were taking chances. We would call it alternative music now, but in hindsight, right, it's kind of labeled as alternative. There were things that were just popping up around. I mean, obviously Nirvana when they hit, but I had heard Nirvana before Nevermind came out. And somebody had a cassette, it was an A and B side of I forget what was on the other side of Love Buzz. And I don't remember if Love Buzz had I forget what was on the other side. I loved it. And I just thought, wow, this is a killer tune. It was a cover. I forget who that original band is that sang Love Buzz, but the Nirvana version was just killer. It really was. So when Nevermind came out, I guess I was like everybody else. It was Big Cheese. Big Cheese was the B-side. Sorry. I absorbed it pretty deeply. I thought Nevermind was just a masterpiece of a record. And I still think that about that record. I loved that band. I thought they were really great at what they did. And I thought Kurt was just a really great writer.
Oh yeah. I mean, Kurt Cobain, Chris Cornell, huge.
I thought Soundgarden, that was just a killer band. And for all kinds of reasons.
So, Michael, we have a 14-year-old girl in the house, and she is all about rock and roll, retro rock and roll. So she will go to the mall on a weekend with her friends and come home with these rock T-shirts.
Yeah.
So we've got, Slipknot and Maiden and Metallica and Nirvana. Nirvana's a new big one.
And so these bands, they're still relevant today. I mean, Led Zeppelin is, the Beatles are still, but seriously, like some of these bands from the 90s are still, in the 80s and the 90s are still relevant today. What do you think contributes to their relevance still?
I think the underlying fact that it's probably been the same throughout all the different eras and genres is the song and how well that song gets executed by a band. And, a recording and a production, it's like you're trying to capture lightning in a bottle in a sense. And sometimes, every now and again, a band gets it, they capture it. And it might just be one song in the body of work that they have, or a few. But it's taken a lot of work to get to those few, but they have them, like the Cult. They have a handful of tunes that you could play on a rock radio station to the end of time. Why is that? It's because I think first and foremost, the song stands on its own. Can I pick up an acoustic guitar and sing you Firewoman? Yes, I can. Can I listen to the Cult and, do it their way? Yes, I would rather, because that's the sound of that song. And I think for whatever reason, it's sounding like some, old man get off my lawn type of situation. But for whatever reason, I see a decline in song craft, and I don't know what to blame that on. I don't know what is the cause. But when I think about sophisticated music, that's also commercially successful, whatever that means. But, a mass audience is there listening and absorbing it.
So any current day artists that you would say, still have it?
Bruno Mars, I think, puts out some pretty good musically speaking. Bruno Mars writes good songs. He does. So there are people out there that are still into song craft. And, there are still people out there doing what they have always been doing, like Sting, whether he's successful or not, or likable or not, it matters not. He's a great songwriter, and that's what he is, and that's what he does best. And he still puts out albums, and they still sound great. He's got great players. So, but nowadays it's different. I have to go seek that out. Back, in the day, it was being brought to me, via mostly a television signal. But I think that there was a time when the craftsmanship was, there was a time most certainly when the craftsmanship of the song was more important than the actual look and image of the performers or who was performing the song. Because if the Supremes could sing it better than, than the Pips or something, then they were going to do it, right? So, because the song was the most important thing at Motown.
Well, the more and more I listen to popular music now, the more I find it's very prepackaged, it's very polished, it's very vanilla to me anyway. Where do you think this is going? Like, what the hell is happening right now?
I think there's a vacuum, and I don't know who or what's going to come along to fill it. But I think that people's tastes are still the same, and that's why kids at 14 are going out and buying Judas Priest t-shirts because they discovered Judas Priest and said, wow, this is quality. That's, I think, the big thing that's missing is the quality. There are very few bands, like Rival Sons is a band that's out there. I think they put out quality rock music. I think there's a bunch.
So, we had in the 90s, early 2000s, the internet started to take over, and it really changed music, didn't it?
When the internet got a little, too pervasive and omnipresent, music, once Napster kind of came along and opened that floodgate, music changed very quickly. So that really is when, you saw the fame game being played like never before.
Yeah, there was a line back in the day where everyone had 15 minutes of fame. That was Andy Warhol had said that. And now everybody has 15 minutes of fame all within 15 minutes, right? Like, it's pretty prevalent nowadays, right?
And that's what I think where maybe the dumbing down of music has been spawned. It's from this need or desire to be famous, not necessarily be musically good or adept at what you do as a band or an artist, a single artist, that's gone. Even when I grew up, we took for granted people like John Mellencamp. You're like, oh God, another Mellencamp song on the radio. Go back and listen to it now. And you're like, you know what? This guy wrote all these tunes. Love him or hate him. There's quality chord progressions going on. And, that's not there anymore.
Where does that leave the kids of this generation?
The kids these days are finding their own little pools to swim in. with their art, entertainment, and leisure. It's more of a single player type of interaction now, societally speaking, if I can say that, but it's true. Everybody's kind of in their little bubbles.
Yeah, I think bubbles is a very good term to use. Like everybody's in their own little world with their eyes closed and their head down, and they're just focusing on their own shit and not thinking about anything else right now, right?
Like I'm walking down the street today, I'm walking up Vine to Hollywood, and I'm like I was listening to some Bach, actually. It sounds so lame, but it's true. I like to listen to classical music when I walk the streets of Hollywood. It makes everything seem so silly. Anyway, but I'm thinking as I'm standing there at this walk sign, I'm like, okay, looking at everyone around me. One guy's staring at his phone. He's got his earbuds in. These other people have their earbuds in. Like everyone's just in their own little world,
So then, Michael, why do you think the quality of, the craftsmanship of music has declined?
I can only attest to it possibly being because bands don't spend as much time together as they used to. I think bands back then, when there was no phone in your face or laptop in your face, even when you're at a jam session, there's a lot of times there's a laptop open because the keyboard player's got his tones in there. And, in between songs, everyone's looking at their phone and da-da-da. That's a whole new thing, really, right? I mean, not new anymore, but I'm just, in terms of 80s and 90s, you all stared at each other when you were done with the song. So you tended to talk about the song more.
Yeah, I know what you're saying for sure. Like there's the lack of connectivity when you're doing something creative is slowly fading into the abyss of nowhere land. Like I understand what you're saying for sure.
Hey, how'd that feel? What was the tempo? Da, 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 I'm in a room now with guys my own age. We've all grown up in the same stuff. So that's kind of how we play. And I've acknowledged it because I've also played with some younger folk recently where I'm like, man, at the end of every song, they're just right on their phone. But, no one's saying anything. And then finally somebody goes, all right, well, you guys want to play blah, blah, blah. It's interesting. It's just a different generation.
Well, I guess we will wait and see what the future generation brings to us in terms of music. I know my 14-year-old girl is all David Grohl right now, and that makes me happy. Now, we don't want to take up too much more of your time, but we do have something that we do every episode when we have a guest called Rapid Fire.
All right.
And they are a series of questions. We just want you to kind of off the top of your head guess or talk about which one. Rapid fire. So just answer as quickly as you can with whatever kind of comes out of you impulsively. Are you ready? McDonald's or KFC?
Ooh, wow. KFC.
Okay, Michael. Let's see how much TV you know. MASH or Hill Street Blues?
Ooh, Hill Street Blues.
Yeah, that was a great theme song. Roller rink or arcade?
Arcade.
All right, let's see the movies. Star Wars, Empire Strikes Back, or Return of the Jedi?
Oh, God. Oh, man. That's a tough one. I'm going on Empire Strikes Back. I'm just going Empire Strikes Back. Yeah, overall.
Duran Duran or Styx?
Oh, wow. Styx.
How about this one? Bike or skateboard?
Oh, wow. Bike. Going bike, yeah. BMX all the way.
Okay, final question. Sunrise or sunset?
Ooh, sunset. I like to sleep through that sunrise if I can. As a Gen Xer, I'm just one of those types,
Awesome. I can relate to that. I'm a sunset girl myself. Okay, Michael. One last question.
One more.
In 2 sentences or less, what is your advice to the Gen Zer?
My advice to the Gen Zer. Hang on to your humanity and get outside more often. So much was kind of floating through my head. I was just sort of grabbing at things as they were coming at me. But I think back on that time. It's not often I think back on that time, so that's the thing. All of a sudden it's like, wow, all this stuff's coming up, so yeah. Well, thanks for this experience.
For sure. And if you ever want to come back and visit us on any of our future episodes to promote something that you're working on or talk about something that you're passionate about, you just let us know. We would love to have you back.
Yeah. Oh, that'd be great. I'd love that. Thanks, man. Awesome. Sure. it feels good to know that these everything I just blathered on about, like, it's not falling on like deaf ears. It's like, you know what I'm talking about. So it felt nice. I feel like, okay, I'm not losing anybody here. And because sometimes that's what it feels like when you do some of these interviews. You're like, okay, I'm going in a territory that the reference points aren't there, right? But with you guys, it's nice because all the reference points are there. So that always feels, I can open up more, I guess what I'm saying, which is always cool.
Well, you can always come back and talk to us, Michael.
I'm gonna take you up on that.
Listen, Michael, you take care.
Yeah, thanks so much. Really appreciate it. You're the best.
Bye-bye.
Ladies and gentlemen, Michael Devin. Wow, that was epic. Wow, Cindy, I have to tell you, every time we have a guest, it's so exciting. I have to tell you, I have a little bit of, what do you call that, skinny crawlies? I don't know what you call it, like goosebumps. Yeah, it was really fantastic to talk to him and to spend some quality time with him and ask some questions that we all relate to.
And isn't he just like a music encyclopedia?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
The amount of information in his head is astounding when it comes to music history. I really feel that we need to campaign to Mr. Devin to come back and have his own segment on the show. We'll call it like Rock Piles or something, and he can chronicle different albums of the Gen X period.
Do you think he would do that?
I don't know.
Oh, that would be amazing.
Wouldn't that be incredible?
Simon is nodding really, really fast over right now. He's like very excited. Let's do that. Speaking of, I think this is time to wrap it up. Once again, another excellent episode, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. I feel inspired actually to go out and buy a record player and get some old vinyls and spin that shit.
There you go. Great. Spin that shit.
Spin that shit.
Let's quickly spin this. Special thanks to Mr. Michael Devin for being on our episode today. Really, from LA, thank you so much for being with us, and we hope to see you and talk to you again very, very soon. Simon says in the booth, yes, we know you. Thank you very much for all your assistance, as always, all the crew over there. Audacity, thank you so much for everything that you do for us. Cindy Lynn, I can't thank you enough. You are the best. I love you. I love you.
You too.
No, you don't.
I do. I love you, you son of a bitch.
Oh my God. You have been listening to another episode of
Hooked on Life.
If you enjoyed this episode of Hooked on Life and you'd like to help support the podcast, please subscribe to our channel. We would also love to hear from you. If you have any ideas for future Hooked on Life podcasts, feel free to drop us a line. You can stay up to date with Cindy and Shane by following them on Facebook and Instagram. And remember, don't worry about tonight's sunset, because there will always be one tomorrow. See ya!